we're going to go ahead and start it with the wellness webinar for today. I appreciate you guys coming on. My name is Dr. Ugo Wokalema. I just go by Dr. Ugo just to keep it short. Obviously, the last name is going to be a little more challenging for most. And I am a clinical pharmacist. Hey, Vivian, I appreciate you coming on. And I'm also working with my wife, Angelita. She's not on for tonight, but we're on a campaign to help as many people as we can to get their health back. So many people right now are struggling with their health, especially here in the States, but honestly, even worldwide. And we were one of them. And so we've actually been able to be blessed what it actually takes to get our health back. Even as health professionals, there's a struggle there. But with that being said, one of the main things that we like to do is to start off these calls is to share our personal testimony. And with that, I usually like to start with my wife because honestly, it was a trickle down effect. She was searching, she was looking, and she found something that was beneficial, very beneficial for her. And so I kind of saw what was going on, of course, in my own household and decided I was going to go ahead and take the plunge as well. So I want to share again a little bit of our personal testimony here. And so with any questions that you may have, we'll put them in the chat. I'll probably check those and answer any of those right before I get into the actual presentation. And tonight we're going to be talking about something that's very important to a lot of people right now, something they call an epidemic going on, and that's going to be when it comes to obesity and weight gain. So before I get into that, you can definitely make sure to just go ahead and drop your questions in the comments. I'll try to address those before we get started with that presentation. But first, as far as my wife, so my lovely wife, we're both in the medical profession. She is a nurse practitioner. I'm a pharmacist myself. And so, we have a lot of the know-how, if you will. We spend lots of good money getting the education to learn how to actually take care of our bodies. Of course, we're trying to do that for our patients, but, ideally, then it should be able to be something that we're able to benefit from as well. Well, when we hit our 40s, that honestly wasn't necessarily the case for us. We got to a place where we were actually struggling a little bit. We had actually heard people talk about, hey, when you hit your 40s, things start going downhill with your health. And we thought that it was like, well, that's for people that don't know what they're doing. Well, apparently, I guess we didn't know what we were doing either. So we started to actually find struggles ourselves. And so with my wife, you can see what it has listed there on the left. She was having joint pain as she was getting into her 40s. Visceral fat was actually starting to accumulate and started to build up. And so she was she really was trying to get that stuff gone. She was in the gym, working out at least an hour a day for about 5 to 6 days a week. When I say working out, I'm not talking about in the gym where you're taking some breaks. No, she's doing programs where she's working straight for an hour. And then on top of that, again, because she's seeing that, not seeing the records or not seeing the results she wants, she'll go for another 15, 20, 30 minutes, but at least an hour, 5 to 6 times a week, still not seeing a breakthrough there. Even like a hamster, eating all the right things, the salads and things like that, trying to keep her calories low. We're working with that paradigm of calories in, calories out, like we've been taught. And we were teaching so many of our patients. Still wasn't helping us to get to where we wanted to be. But she was starting with that to even now having issues with her cholesterol going up. She is actually having anxiety and depression, had actually been on an antidepressant for those two conditions, of course, was still going on. And this, she started to develop irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS, and also acid reflux. With IBS, she was really developing some lactose intolerance to the point where someone like herself who loves cheese, now she doesn't just love putting cheese on stuff, like she actually would eat cheese by itself. That's how much she loved it. She had to give that up because it was just not worth all the aftermath that came from that. But then acid reflux had her in a situation where she was taking 5 to 6 meds with no relief. So you're still like really suffering pretty much with every meal. And of course, we got to eat to live. So that's not a fun place to be. Insomnia, issues with sleep, and of course, getting into this perimenopausal period of her life. And so getting the hot flashes, the mood swings, difficulty building muscle, even despite the fact that she's constantly being in the gym. And of course, not seeing the weight come off like she wanted it to. So after starting this system, she was introduced to it by one of our colleagues now, but one of our friends, godsend, named Dr. Natasha. She introduced her to the system after she was introduced to it, and that changed everything. So starting in about January, almost the very beginning of January, maybe late 2024, but early January of 2025, she started on a system that really revolutionized her health. And all those different things that I was telling you about that were pretty much kind of building steam in terms of getting worse and worse and worse so much of that has actually, if not all of it, has turned around. So her body fat decreased from 32%, 25%. You can see how her belly fat looks now at this point in time. And actually, just several months ago, things have improved even from there. She's building muscle without excessive exercise. Went from working out about 5 to 6 times a week, now doing it maybe about 3 times a week, which is way more reasonable. And also, again, being able to get much better results as she's doing it. Joint pain had gone away. Again, anxiety and depression actually was able to come off of her antidepressant that she'd been on for a decade prior to starting this system. Getting the restful sleep that she's wanting, those hot flashes and those mood swings had dropped off. And again, having that stable weight, a weight that she actually wants for the first time in several years. And again, dietary restrictions that she was doing so much before, again, knowing how her body actually works, she's able to actually get back to eating so much of the stuff in the food that she was eating before, including that cheese and the dairy. So I'm seeing this taking place in front of my face. And so I'm like, okay, I think I've seen enough. About 3 months later, I'm like, let me go ahead and jump in. So some of my struggles when I first started, again, as a pharmacist, supposed to know what to do, but I'm actually starting to deal with some things that I hadn't been dealing with before. Again, starting to get brain fog at work, gas and bloating from poor gut health. So I was starting to take ginger supplements, taking some probiotics, as we call them, and maybe a little bit of benefit, but honestly, nothing that was really solving the problem at all. I definitely had to keep taking them every single day for whatever benefit I was getting. I also had stubborn belly fat as well. Despite diet and exercise, I mean, I've been doing about 5 to 6 times, but I was going hard, very hard for about at least 4 times a week. And increasing joint pain, which is making going hard when I'm working out, getting harder and harder. Something where I was questioning, am I going to be able to really work out the way that I want to going into my 40s now? Am I going to like my late 40s, my 50s? Like, what's that going to look like if this pain just keeps increasing, especially in my knees and in my hips? And so after starting the system, again, everything changed for me as well. Getting almost on day one, especially with one of the products there, it's a lot of mental clarity. That brain fog pretty much melted away immediately. Gut health was restored. Right now, I'm not on either one of those supplements, the ginger or the probiotics, and I feel better than I was when taking them. Six pack, as you see, has returned for the first time in decades. Last time I saw that was high school, and so excited about that. But honestly, one of the most important things for me that's happened, that inflammation that was causing all of that joint pain, the hip pain, the knee pain, that has gone away as well. Honestly, sometimes I get little twinges here and there, but even those twinges get less and less and less frequent. I'm just loving what I've been able to accomplish just by being introduced by something that's been so life-changing, so health-giving to me. And so we're going to talk about what that system is a little bit, but it's also good for people to understand, what is actually happening with their bodies, just in general. How do we actually get to the root? How do we get this? Because in essence, this is root cause healing. We're not doing anything here that is requiring us to use medications, pretty much slap a band-aid on symptoms, but it's actually getting to the root cause so there's no symptoms to begin with. And so right now, I'm just going to take a quick look to see if there's any questions or comments in the chat. It looks like there are none. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed with tonight's topic. And that is going to be, why is weight loss so hard? So hopefully this is something that anyone who's on is going to be able to benefit from. Again, if someone that you know could benefit from this, hey, feel free to actually shoot them real quick a text. Let them know, hey, if you're struggling with your weight, there might be some good information that, it might be beneficial. I mean, you might not know this information from anything else, but again, a lot of people, they've been struggling for decades, so it's a shot in the dark. But again, you saw the benefits that is done for me. One thing I actually even forgot to tell you about, which really doesn't have as much to do with weight loss, my mom did lose some weight, is that on the same system, my mom was able to reverse her diabetes. So it helps, again, with our metabolic health, but that's really one of the biggest things driving our weight, the weight and the obesity epidemic that we have. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. If that's something that, so if this is a topic hopefully that's near and dear to you, that you maybe will benefit from, go ahead and put a 1 in the comments. Again, I'll check that out. I'll probably see some things popping up, but I just want to make sure that hopefully the right crowd is in the Zoom for tonight. So we're going to go ahead and talk about how common is weight gain and obesity. So right now, they say it's an epidemic, and it's pretty darn bad in these streets. It's pretty bad. Right now, over 40% of adults in the U.S. are living with obesity. All right, that means there's a actual measure of Granted, it doesn't necessarily pan out for everybody, but it's a pretty good measure of how much weight we're actually holding on to relative to normal weight. And so it's called the BMI. That's the body mass index. And when that body mass index gets higher, that means that we're actually putting on more weight. If that BMI is 30 or higher, that would mean that we're obese. Okay. And so 40% of adults, though, are actually obese. But if we actually throw in people who are not just simply obese, because that's kind of the further end of the spectrum, but you can actually just simply be overweight and not quite obese. But if we're throwing in people who are overweight and obese, now we're talking about 3 out of 4 adults in America fall within this range. That's almost 75% of the American population then that's at least overweight, if not obese. That is insane, and that's something that I think a lot of people who are falling within those range, those descriptions, they're not necessarily happy about. There's something that they're actually trying to do about it, but it's been a struggle. But the rates just keep climbing and climbing throughout these recent decades, and it has many people really continuing to struggle despite, again, active efforts. And so we're going to talk about, what are some of the things that are truly driving that weight gain for a lot of people, which can actually then, if we understand what's really going on behind the surface, what's really driving our weight to go up, then we can actually get to the root of what it is and see the results that we're wanting to see. So first, we're going to talk about one of our body's survival mechanisms. Okay, so there's a lot of them. Our body is very good at adapting, but one of the things that it does to deal with the issue of potentially not having enough energy in the future, say if we were to potentially not have access to food for a significant amount of time, is to store energy. And the way that our body primarily stores energy is via fat. Okay, so a lot of times, if I'm recording a video on social media, I'm talking about energy. I'm actually typically talking about storing energy, typically talking about storing fat. Okay, and typically that's what people want to go when they're talking about trying to get rid of weight. Okay, so this is a natural response, and again, it's supposed to be helpful in times of scarcity. But at the end of the day, we live in a country of plenty. So most people aren't dealing with, oh, I don't have enough food, but yet their body is always constantly trying to actually store more and more energy and constantly trying to store more and more fat. And so the question is, well, why is that happening? Even when we're doing low calories and calorie restrictions and trying to burn as many calories as possible, why is this still happening? Why am I still struggling to gain weight? Well, I want to make sure that I actually promote one of the things that I think really helps people when it comes to losing weight, and that's the fact that the calories in, calories out paradigm, I believe, for a lot of people, I mean, you have it with your own personal experience, that paradigm just doesn't seem to work very well. You look to your left, you look to your right, everyone's talking about calories in, calories out, but we saw the numbers. So many people are still struggling with their weight. And if that was the case, if this calories in, calories out paradigm actually worked for so many people, there'd be no reason why those numbers are continuing to climb and climb and climb throughout the decades. And again, it's not even just with, your layperson, but it's even with us in the medical field. We're struggling just as much because we're, not only touting it, but we're also trying to follow it ourselves, and we're struggling. Well, at the end of the day, our body doesn't talk in calories. Our body talks in hormones. All right. One thing I typically like to tell people is that your body doesn't have any calorie receptors. All right. But it has a ton of hormone receptors. That's how it actually regulates what's going on in your body. In this case, what do you actually do with weight? Are we actually burning energy or actually storing energy? And the primary hormone for that, well, I like to call the fat storage hormone, is going to be a hormone called insulin. Okay. There's one thing you need to take from this talk. You need to just focus in on this hormone called insulin and what it's doing in the body. Okay. So insulin plays a critical role in fat storage. If not, it's almost, or energy storage, I just say in general, but also in this case, fat storage, which is what typically causes us to actually put on the weight. So high levels of insulin, if we actually have, especially constantly high levels of insulin into our bloodstream, then it's going to lead to increased fat storage. Our bodies are going to figure out, okay, we got this extra energy. What do we do with it? The most efficient way for us to store it is to store it as fat, which is going to lead to weight gain. And so when insulin levels are constantly high, which means our bodies are constantly in fat storage mode, as I like to call it, then that means it's going to be very challenging for you to burn fat efficiently, no matter how many calories you're trying to eat, no matter how much you're working out to try to burn those calories. If your hormone, in this case insulin, is constantly high, all bets are off. That fat is actually not even going to prevent you from potentially losing weight, but potentially you're still going to be gaining more as time goes on. And so, again, this is going to be contributing to weight loss difficulties. Okay, and so insulin resistance and weight gain. I want to break down what this term insulin resistance is. So we talked about what insulin is, right? It's this hormone that actually is very important for energy storage. So two of the big things that it does is that I already talked about one, it actually takes extra energy and stores it as fat. But typically that's because there's leftover energy that may be in the bloodstream after you eat a meal, and that's going to be energy that actually comes as sugar or carbs, just blood sugar. That's what typically gives us energy after a meal. Okay. And so what can happen is that if we actually constantly have high levels of blood sugar, then it's going to cause us to actually secrete insulin into the bloodstream to help get that blood sugar down. I'm trying to go back to the last slide so you can see this diagram on the left here. Insulin is actually the thing that allows your blood sugar to get into your cells. It's like the key that unlocks the cells. So the receptors for insulin are like the keyhole, and then insulin is like the key. Once you unlock that keyhole with the key, then the cell opens up and allows sugar to come in, which gives that cell energy. But it also allows now the blood sugar to get out of the bloodstream. So this is something that then will ultimately lower your blood sugar. Gets the sugar out of the blood and into the cells, which actually need it for energy. So with insulin resistance, we have a situation where the body stops listening to insulin like it typically would because insulin is always around. Okay. Now this is pretty much something that happens with almost any hormone that we have in the body. If it gets pumped out way too much, then the body stops listening to it. In this case, if the body actually listened to insulin the same at all times and insulin just kept getting pumped out at higher and higher levels, now we have an issue where we actually would be in low blood sugar because, hey, we're so much insulin, we're actually taking every single last bit of sugar out of the cell, out of the bloodstream to try to listen to insulin. We're like, whoa, the body's gonna learn. It's like, hey, I gotta protect myself. So I just can't listen to insulin as much as I used to if it's going to be around this much. Now the problem is that means that sugar stays in the blood. The funny thing is though is that then the body now has to be like, well, the bloodstream, the sugar in the blood is still kind of high. Let me pump out even more insulin. And so then the receptors in the body say like, well, now it's even more insulin. So I'm not really going to listen to it as much now anymore. And so this just pretty much gets us in this, if we don't change anything, things just get worse and worse and worse. And again, the more insulin around, that means that we're actually then going to be putting on more and more and more fat because again, insulin is your fat storage hormone. If you have more and more amounts of it, then you have more and more fat. Okay. And we stay again in that fat storage mode. Hopefully this is making sense. If not, again, drop a question in the comments and I can definitely try to address it when I get done with the presentation. Again, hard for me to toggle between the two. All right, so one of the biggest things that actually triggers us to constantly be having our insulin level, our insulin being pumped out is constant eating. Okay, so we're gonna talk about the relationship between insulin levels and fat storage by talking about the fact that with every meal and every snack, whether it's a healthy snack, low calorie, fat-free, all that good stuff. It's still going to end up raising our blood sugar, and then with our blood sugar going up, it's going to cause the pancreas to release that insulin. Okay, so if we're eating every 2 to 3 hours, that means that insulin is going to be produced every 2 to 3 hours. The thing about insulin is that it sticks around for about 4 hours. So if we're eating more frequently, then insulin can even have a chance to go away. We're going to end up getting accumulating levels of insulin, which means that we're going to have accumulation of fat and fat and fat. So that's one of the big things that we have to consider when we're trying to tackle this obesity is how often are we eating? So if we can actually, if we want to, actually get to a point where we're losing weight, being able to have some fat loss, it can't be in a situation where we're eating all the time. And so on behalf of the medical establishment, which has oftentimes said, hey, you want to eat to help stimulate your metabolism, is actually blocking it. And so I'd like to apologize on behalf of the establishment for that, and hopefully from here to kind of correct that wrong. But it's not just, again, what we're eating or how often we're eating, although what we're eating is actually pretty important too, but it's also our gut. So when it comes to gut health, a lot of people are just now learning about how important the gut health is. And pretty much one of the biggest things health is something that most people aren't aware of. When we eat, we're not actually eating for one. Even if you're pregnant, we're not even just eating for two, but you're actually eating for trillions upon trillions of bacteria in your gut. And when those gut bacteria are in a poor balance, now that leads to poor gut health. And we have poor gut health, then ends up leading to increased cravings for typically things that aren't going to be helpful out of those sugary sweets and things like that. It's going to actually lead to inflammation. And inflammation actually leads to a stalling of the fat loss from the fat cells. And so your fat cells are not going to want to actually give up the fat if there's inflammation going on. And that's very closely driven and more probably the most powerful way for it to be for us to have inflammation in our bodies is because we're in poor gut health. But also prevents something called the browning of fat. So it inhibits the conversion of what we call white fat, which actually typically stores that fat, versus to brown fat, which is what is actually wanting to actually burn that fat off. And so again, if we're in that inflammation, if we have poor gut health, we're not able to make that conversion. And again, it's going to increase the prevalence of insulin resistance. Why? This inflammation, honestly, a lot of times what happens is that the toxins that the bad bacteria in the gut actually release into the bloodstream, when they get into the body and they actually attach themselves to insulin receptors, those insulin receptors aren't wanting to listen to insulin. Sounds a lot like insulin resistance. Well, pretty much now it's induced not by how much you're eating or anything like that, or high insulin levels and all that stuff that I explained before. It's just simply because you're in poor gut health. And so this is another layer where it's like if we can improve that, then we can actually help to get a handle on what's going on with our weight. And I wanted to talk a little bit about another hormone, and that's called leptin. All right. So insulin, I believe, is the main one that we need to be worried about, but it actually has an impact on another one called leptin. And leptin is actually made by fat cells, and it plays a key role in feeling in a hunger, fullness, and energy use. It actually is something that helps us if we're being pumped out, typically at first. If we're actually sensitive to it, it helps us to actually not want to eat. The more fat cells that we have, the more leptin is produced. And leptin typically helps us to feel full or feel like we don't want to eat so that we're actually, again, maintaining a good body weight. And so it will tell the brain when the body has stored enough fuel. Okay. So if we're storing more and more fuel, then we're actually releasing more and more leptin, trying to tell the body, hey, trying to tell the brain we don't need to eat anymore. Well, again, if we're eating in a way, though, with all of the insulin resistance, our insulin levels are high, and we still keep packing on the fat, and the leptin keeps getting released, we actually end up in a situation where we have leptin resistance. So anytime you have any of these hormones, you hear the word resistance after it, it means that there's way too much of that hormone around in the body, and the body doesn't want to hear it anymore, or at least not like it used to. And so in this case, leptin is really for the brain, and then the brain stops listening to leptin. In other words, when I was talking about how leptin helps you to feel full, helps the brain make you feel like, okay, I don't need to eat anymore. Well, what happens if the brain stops listening to the leptin? That means that now we're just kind of like no brakes. We're all gas when it comes to, are we going to eat? Are we going to eat? Are we going to eat? Sure, sure. Why not? There's nothing now that I'm actually listening to. I should say nothing, but at least I have less that I'm listening to that actually make me want to stop eating. So like I said before, the more and more fat that we have, it makes more and more leptin to the point where now the brain doesn't want to listen to leptin. And so again, hunger rises, fullness fades. And another thing about insulin is that insulin actually helps our leptin or helps our fat cells to produce leptin. So if we have, again, going back to insulin levels being high, that fat storage hormone actually tell the fat cells, hey, well, you go ahead and tell the brain that, we're good. Well, if we're just constantly again pumping out even more leptin because insulin is around, we're going to get to this leptin resistance level or place even quicker. We're going to get to that place where we don't feel like turning off the brakes. We just want to keep eating and eating and eating, potentially all day. And I talked about what that looks like. It means insulin's getting pumped out all day. And so all of this because it becomes this vicious cycle where, again, doing the things that we made in terms of calories in, calories out, which really doesn't help, it could be triggering all kinds of other processes hormonally, which really matters, that are beyond us. And we're struggling, and we don't know why. And so I wanted to hopefully demystify this, that it's not about calories in, calories out. It's about the hormones. All right. So insulin resistance and leptin resistance. Again, insulin stays high, leptin climbs early on, but eventually the brain stops listening. Inflammation then starts increasing as well. And that actually then again helps to leptin stop to working as well as it should. Again, we're going to have stronger hunger pangs. We're going to have more cravings, which is going to lead to extra fat stored and slower weight loss. All right. So what are the main common signs of us being in fat storage mode? These things are not necessarily going to be as much as, putting on the weight, but things that kind of lead to that. So you're going to have the stubborn belly fat, which is more of a visual, but you can also have low energy. Now, this is typically because, again, of the insulin. I talked about before how insulin is supposed to be helping our blood sugar to get into our cells. Every single last cell in your body has these receptors so that insulin can attach to them, open up the cell, and allow that sugar to come in. So that sugar is supposed to come in and give those cells energy. Well, if those receptors aren't listening to insulin like they should, that means that sugar is staying in the bloodstream, but it's also not getting into the cell like it should. So that's going to have you feeling sluggish. It's going to have you feeling low energy. And of course, it's also going to keep your blood sugar high as well. So really, again, a big double. I mean, this is just a poor situation on both ends. And again, this is then going to lead to endless cravings. I mean, your body's like, well, I feel like I don't have enough energy for myself, so let me go ahead and keep increasing your hunger hormones in the meantime, and you're going to just want to keep eating and eating and eating. And we already talked about even potentially getting to the point where we have that leptin resistance. That's also not going to help as well. So again, some common signs of what being in fat storage mode can look like. So how do we actually support fat loss? How do we actually then take this knowledge that we have about, okay, what's actually going underneath the hood when it comes to what really is driving things, which is the hormones? What do we do to actually, fix this situation? Well, we definitely got to stabilize our blood sugar. Blood sugar is the main thing that's causing insulin to be secreted. All right. Again, blood sugar goes up, so does insulin. So if we can actually look at what's going on in our blood sugars, then we can actually get to a point where, okay, if we can keep our blood sugars lower throughout the day, then we can start keeping our insulin levels lower throughout the day. Again, this is our phone, so the less of it is around, the less we're going to be storing fat. Okay. So if we can then reduce those insulin spikes, and pretty much those always go up after sugar goes up, then we can actually, again, keep insulin levels low, and then also get to a point where we're starting to get into fat burning mode as opposed to staying in fat storage mode all the time. And we like to talk about before, improving our gut health. So again, if we can decrease that inflammation that's going on, again, that inflammation does so much to actually wreck our metabolism. Again, keeps our fat cells from actually wanting to release the fat, keeps us from having, our going from the white fat to the brown fat, all these different things. Then we can actually, again, even though we're starting with something in our gut, it actually helps our body as a whole to get rid of this fat that we have been storing for quite some time. So what are some actual strategies that I personally would like to recommend for anyone that's coming on and trying to figure out, hey, what do I do to then attack this fat? How do I actually get my hormones to do what I need them to do to drop the weight? Well, one of the first things is that we want to decrease our post-meal sugar spikes. All right. If we can actually have our sugar not go so far up after a meal, because we got to eat. So insulin's going to has a job to do. Insulin's not like this maniacal enemy that we just need to get rid of. If we're not, then we have type 1 diabetes, which we don't want either. So we need insulin. It's just that we need our bodies to start listening to insulin again and to have our insulin levels be a lot lower. So one of the biggest ways to do that is to actually do something that I call FFP with our meals. It's called food order. And so we have our different macros. We have our carbohydrates. We have our proteins. We have our fats. But we also have fibers, which are actually complex carbohydrates. But we want to actually the more of the processed carbohydrates, like your rices, your breads, cereals, things like that. Definitely, your desserts, things that are actually sweet. We don't want to be eating them too frequently. We definitely want to be eating them first with the meal. We want to actually eat what I call FFP. So if you can put FFP in the chat so it help you remember it. FFP before with the onset of every meal before we get to the carbs, if any. We're going to focus on our fiber, our fat, and our protein. Again, fiber, fat, and protein, FFP. That will actually, eating those foods first, they have very little impact on our insulin. Fat has almost no impact on our insulin. Fiber actually helps to decrease the speed with which our sugar gets into our bloodstream, and protein has very little impact, or at least a moderate amount of impact on our insulin. So eating those foods first before we actually get to our carbs, which are actually going to shoot our blood sugar up the highest, that actually then helps to decrease that blood sugar spike after a meal, which then decreases our insulin spike after that meal, because after sugar comes the insulin. So if we only have a little bit of sugar coming into our little bit of a blood sugar spike after a meal, we only have a little bit of an insulin spike. A little bit of insulin spike, a little bit of fat storage. So hopefully this is making sense. I also have strategic fasting listed here. So That's something that some people call time restricted eating, but I like to call it intermittent fasting. So with intermittent fasting, what we're doing is that we're actually picking a window throughout the day that hey, I'm only going to eat during these hours of the day. Uh, One of the ones I recommend is where we're eating about 8 hours throughout the day and we're not eating throughout the other 16 hours. That's what we call the fasting period when you're not eating. So if we can get to a point where we're actually, maybe for someone who's never done this before, we're eating 3 meals a day. Maybe we start, cutting back to the point where we can get to 2 meals a day, slowly but surely. But our bodies typically need to get used to it. I mean, it can be a big jump to go from, hey, I'm eating 3 meals a day and immediately go to two. But that can actually help you to have less time throughout the day than you're actually eating, less times that you're eating, less times that insulin's coming up. Again, that helps you to get into fat burning mode and stay there longer. And then again, when it comes to gut health, one of the biggest things that helps with that is actually feeding the good gut bacteria. So the question is, what does the good gut bacteria actually want? It actually wants fiber. All right, it actually wants a lot of fiber. And for most of us, we are woefully coming up short when it comes to that. Pretty much, they say that about 3% of adults are actually getting the minimum requirements, not the maximum, but the minimum requirements of fiber every day. So you can imagine if only 3% of us are getting the minimum requirement of fiber every day, and it's those good gut bacteria that needs fiber, and ideally a variety of it coming from different sources, like your beans, your legumes, your veggies, your fruits, your whole grains, even some seeds and things like that, then we're going to be struggling to actually keep that good gut health up. And again, I talked about what that looks like. Typically, it's going to lead to inflammation, which leads to issues with your insulin levels coming up high. So, feeding those good gut bacteria, giving them what they want, which is fiber and a variety of it, that's going to help immensely. And so, when your body is actually in harmony, what does it actually look like? You start making fat burning effortless. You can just keep doing the same thing. Maybe fat doesn't necessarily fall off all at one time because we've probably been driving things in a wrong direction for quite some time, getting our insulin levels really high. Once they gradually start coming down, that fat starts to come down as well. Our cravings start to diminish. Again, maybe that leptin resistance, maybe if we're having some of that goes away. Again, energy levels start to soar because your body's actually able to take in the sugar after a meal as opposed to, again, with insulin resistance, not getting it in there. And then managing your weight becomes even simpler. Okay. So this journey towards health and wellness becomes enjoyable, and the big thing is it's sustainable. Again, I'm not really going to be able to see this right now, but I just want people to put it in the chat. How many of you have ever done something, some sort of weight, some sort of cleanse, some sort of whatever, and you did lose weight, but whatever process it was that helped you to lose that weight, you're like, this is not sustainable, and you're probably not doing it right now. If that's you. Put a one in the chat. Please put a one in the chat if that's where you've been. Again, we're trying to do these crazy things that just don't work very well in the long term. And again, it's supposed to be something that's supposed to get us in good health and keep us there. That should be the goal. It shouldn't be like, hey, I just want to lose weight. And then I do some crazy, process to get there, but I don't know how I can stay there. We want to actually do something that's going to actually work in the long term and help keep us in health, help us keep us with a good weight for the decades to come. All right. And so with that, I did want to check, and because I think we're going to be talking about now the system that me and my wife have found. So hopefully this will be helpful for anybody. But I'm going to check the comments real quick, see if there's any questions that someone may have dropped there. All right, I see a FFP, but I don't see any questions. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to, and again, even when I'm talking about this system, any questions about the system before I get done, just go ahead and drop them in the chat and I can address those. And we can also address them after I talk about our system real quick. But the system is aptly named the Feel Great System. And honestly, it's because for so many people who actually get on the system and, make sure that they actually work with it, very simple system, it actually helps them to feel great in so many different ways. But one of those big ways is with weight loss, which is what we've been talking about today. And so what it's addressing is one of the biggest issues that's really driving the poor health issues for so many people. We talked about it in this presentation, and it's called insulin resistance. Again, our focus today was on weight gain, but honestly, there's a reason why I didn't just lose weight and that was it. There's a reason why I was actually able to, get my gut health back together. I was able to actually get help with the inflammation I was having in my knees and my brain fog. It's because it's so closely related with so many different conditions that are out there. Almost these different chronic conditions that we have out here, so many of them that are especially metabolic related, are as a result of insulin resistance. They're almost a symptom the fruit of the insulin resistance tree. So it can start with stuff that's a little bit more benign, like frequent urination, or the cravings, especially the cravings for carbs. We have the high blood pressure, though. Again, some of these more actual chronic health conditions, if you will. But it could be high cholesterol, high blood pressure. We've always said that this is a fat issue. It's a sugar issue. We're actually finding out that no, it's actually an insulin resistance issue. With the cholesterol, again, it's potentially that we have so much sugar built up in the system that we're turning that sugar into cholesterol, and now we're driving up those levels in the body. High blood pressure is pretty much because of insulin resistance of the kidneys. High insulin levels helps us to hold on to salt, which then helps us to hold on to the fluids, which then is going to bring up our blood pressure. Even things like polycystic ovarian syndrome or erectile dysfunction. We're talking about sexual issues now with our sexual system, whether it be for females and males. This is actually as a result of insulin resistance. Even when it comes to things like Alzheimer's disease, they're calling this type 3 diabetes. Now, I talked about how blood sugar starts to build up in the system because of insulin resistance. That's type 2 diabetes right there, pure and simple. It's been so associated, this insulin resistance has been so closely associated with Alzheimer's disease that's what they're calling it, type 3 diabetes. So whether it be issues that we're dealing with now or issues that we don't want to have in the future, perhaps on this insulin resistance is super important for our health, again, in the present and also in the future. Again, it can also be things like skin tags. It can be things like, and again, inflammation, like I was having, just different things that can actually show us that insulin resistance is probably with us, if not necessarily our actual blood work. I won't talk about that too much tonight, but there's definitely something that if you follow me or you can reach out to me, we can talk about a little bit more. So what's actually driving this? Pretty much I talked about it before. We're eating way too frequently. Sometimes not even just how often we're eating, but here I actually want to focus on what we're eating. These ultra processed foods. And most of these have had tons of the fiber taken out of them. So we talked about the importance of fiber before for our gut health. This is the reason why so many of us are not getting even the lowest recommended amount of fiber, because the foods that we're eating have been stripped of them. Fiber really helps for food to have a long shelf life. You know how you can go to a grocery store where about 70% of the food there is ultra processed. That food is just sitting there for weeks, months. Food didn't used to do that. But you take the fiber out of it and now it can do that. But if you actually take the fiber out of it, that now allows the blood sugar from those same foods, or the sugar, to actually go into your bloodstream super quickly, because fiber would typically help to blunt how quickly that sugar would actually get absorbed into your system. So you take this apple here and you remove the fiber. Well, now you have apple juice. And that's great. It can be all natural, it can be organic, but it's still going to spike your blood sugar way more than it would if you actually just ate that apple with the fiber that actually comes with it. Okay. Also, with that, there's going to be so much sugar that you can have in an apple. You don't only want to eat so many. When you're talking about the sugar that's in the apple juice, you're probably talking about the sugar that's coming from about 5 or 6 apples, all right there in just one in just one cup. And again, no fiber to help blunt that blood sugar spike. Same thing with wild rice. You take that away, take away the fiber. You have now the white rice, again, shooting your blood sugar up whenever you are eating. And typically, again, we're eating 2 to 3 hours, every 2 to 3 hours. This is just keeping our insulin levels high and high and high. And again, it's not feeding our guts, so it keeps us in poor gut health. So what is the solution? Well, we've been introduced to it. And again, I just want to share this with you. It's called the Feel Great System. And the first half of it, it's only 2 all natural plant-based products. We're going to be bringing that fiber back. All right. With the fiber, it's a product that we call Balance. And it's because it brings balance to our gut bacteria. It's coming from 7 different plant-based sources of fiber. So again, I talked about the variety there. The good gut bacteria that we have in our gut, there's so many different types, but they don't all eat the same thing. And so if you want all of the good gut bacteria to be thriving in your body, then you've got to be eating lots of fiber, but also fiber that's coming from different sources. Can't just eat broccoli and beans all day, especially the same type of beans. There's got to be some variety there, and this gives you that right off the bat, okay? And so again, with my wife, the IBS, the lactose intolerance, it reversed that. Constipation, diarrhea, again, even like your skin problems, a lot of times that's just your body just trying to flush out toxins. A lot of the toxins that are coming from poor gut health, you get your gut health together, your skin starts to look a little bit better. I like to think mine looks pretty good. I don't know what y'all think, or you can even see it on Zoom, but hey, it's been a blessing for me. And again, I talked about anxiety, depression. Your body is actually producing the vast majority of the neurotransmitters for your body in the gut. You may not know that. And so this is the reason why my wife was able to actually get off of her antidepressant, because she got her gut health back together. And so Again, it's helping to decrease those blood sugar spikes. You can see here, the University of Sydney has actually found that this balance product, if you take it right before a meal, it can actually decrease your blood sugar spike by over 40%. Like I talked about before, if your blood sugar is not going up as high, then your insulin's not coming up as high. Okay, so this again is helping people with diabetes. I talked about before, my mother, 30-year diabetic, was on this system for about a month and a half, had her A1C come down to 5.1. And it's helping so many others to do the same thing, coming off of their diabetes meds, and again, just giving them so much benefit from that. No one wants the long-term complications of diabetes. Let's get to it at the root. In addition to that, it helps a lot with actual cholesterol. It helps to decrease the amount of cholesterol that you get from a meal, again, taking it right before a meal. And the Cleveland Clinic, the #1 heart hospital in the world, they've actually studied this. So it's not just a regular old supplement. This is something that is actually found in the physician's desk reference. That's how well it's actually been studied. And they found that such a product, if taken regularly, could reduce cardiovascular risk. That's that risk of heart attack or stroke on a population basis and potentially decrease the need and or dose of lipid-lowering prescription drugs. That's going to be something called what we typically call a statin. All right. Yeah. I don't want to put anybody out there for HIPAA, but if anyone is on a statin, I don't want to put a 2 in the chat unless you really were wanting to share that. But that's something that we could potentially have less of a need of. Maybe decrease the dose, maybe come off of that. There's been a testimony for a lot of people being on a system like this. Now, the other half of this, again, just 2-product system, is going to be something that makes fasting way easier than it would be on your own. And that's a product called the Unamate tea. This tea comes from the yerba mate plant, which is primarily found in South America. And what it's been able to do, they found for people that are drinking it there, obviously, people in South America are going to be using products and plants that are there, helps them to not feel as hungry all the time. And so what this company has found is that if they distill it and, with the patented process, that can actually help to decrease hunger spikes and the food noise, as I like to call it, that need to always have to eat significantly. That's actually going to actually produce more of your body's own GLP-1. Now, we hear a lot about GLP-1s today. They're being marketed so heavily, even by athletes like Serena Williams, Charles Barkley, all that good stuff. But this is, of course, the stuff that's cooked up by Big Pharma. We want here to be able to boost our body's own GLP-1. There's only one reason why there's a GLP-1 receptor is because our bodies actually make it. Again, another hormone, very important. So once we're actually being able to sip on this tea throughout the day, whenever we're actually getting that food noise, it helps us to make that food noise go away. So it makes intermittent fasting so much easier, or even the snacking. So you've actually started your feeding window. You actually want to continue to stay away from food. You just sip on that tea throughout the day. Again, it'll make that food noise goes away, and it'll make, again, fasting and staying away from snacks super easy. But it also gives us a lot of energy. It also helps for people who may have fatty liver disease. It helps you to actually burn up that fat a lot more quickly. It just increases the metabolism of the liver there. Just a very strong thing. And again, the more that we can stay away from eating, the more that we can actually go from having all these high insulin levels. We go from fat storage mode now to fat burning mode. So very important, very critical in our efforts to try to, again, lose that extra fat. So again, just to kind of talk about, again, what we have here. We have a product here that's got 5 different patents on it, plenty of clinical studies. That's why it's in the physician's desk reference. Matter of fact, it's something that you can actually use flex spending dollars on it. Again, not your typical supplement. It's been studied that well that the government will actually allow you to use those dollars to actually pay for it. It's safe and natural. You can use it in pregnant women. You can use it in nursing women. We use it in children. When my daughter was in 3rd grade last year, we actually started one of her classmates on it because her mother was concerned about what her weight was doing. And so we're able to help her with that. So very safe products. Again, all natural, completely plant-based. It's kosher, all that good stuff. Guaranteed. So it's actually got a 90-day money-back guarantee. That's how much we actually believe in the system. Again, I didn't know anything about it, but now that I do know how it works and what it's actually helping to combat, again, if it doesn't work, you feel like, hey, it's done nothing for me over 90 days. People can actually get their money back. And it ends up being about cost neutral. I'll talk about what that looks like in a second. And it's actually being used in now over 60 countries, but right there it says over 50 countries, but still worldwide, trying to increase the reach as something that's really able to, again, help people to get their health back. So we got our 2 products, again, the Balance Fiber and the Unamate tea to help stay away from food throughout the day. And so I'll talk about it more on the next slide as far as like what that looks like as a daily rhythm. But when it comes to the fact that, with the fasting, if we're able to maybe go from eating several times a day to only eating two big meals a day, who knows, maybe a little bit of snacking, but we've taken a completely taken out an entire meal and getting a lot of the snacking out of the way. For most of us in 2026, that's going to be saving us about $5 to $10 a day. And so with the cost of the system, it's about 159 a month, which is about $5 and some change a day. Man, I think it's like $5.17 a day. And so if we're able to actually leverage this, get our health back, so it's not for nothing. We're not trying to save a dollar. We're not trying to save a buck. But if we're actually using it as it's supposed to be used, it can actually then be cost neutral. It can even potentially be cost positive, depending on how much you may have been snacking and eating before. And so as far as the daily rhythm and what that looks like, we're going to be starting in the morning with the tea. So instead of going and getting your breakfast, as you normally would, getting some food in your system, you're going to be getting that tea in your system. Matter of fact, I'll go ahead and get a little bit in right now. So with that tea, with the Unamate tea, have to keep your food noise down throughout the morning so that when you get to lunch, that's when you officially break your fast. And so since you were sleeping throughout the night before, and you didn't eat anything until maybe say, who knows, 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, that gives you a long time that insulin was not being pumped out. Its levels to be able to drop down, and you go from fat storage mode now to fat burning mode. That's what that big fire here is all about. So then you actually eat. Your break your fast is going to actually cause you to, when you eat, you're going to have your blood sugar go up. You're going to have your insulin go up. But the question is, how much does your insulin have to go up? Only as much as your blood sugar goes up. And so that's where we take that balance. Again, that balance, so you take it right before that meal, decreases the that you would have had after that by over 40%, which means that your insulin spike after that is going to be much less. And then now, of course, you've broken your fast, but you don't necessarily have to be eating for the next however many hours after that. You can now get back to the Unamate tea, to actually getting back to killing that food noise so that when you get to dinner now, you can take another balance, decrease that blood sugar spike by 40%, which of course is going to decrease that insulin spike that comes after that. And then for the rest of the day, going into the evening, going into the night while we're sleeping, of course, we're fasting then. And then we wash, rinse, repeat for the next day. Again, starting the day off with the Unamate, getting the energy, getting that fat burn on until we get to lunch, so on and so forth. So this is pretty much the system. It's very simple, which makes it very sustainable. It's not hard to incorporate into what we're doing. And you can see how it's helped so many people here on this particular slide. We have Mike here who has no gout now, and A1C went from 13.8, clearly diabetic, down to 5.9, and down almost 90 pounds in the process. Again, insulin resistance is tied to diabetes, but it's also tied to, of course, weight loss, as we've clearly seen. So he had an incredible improvement in both. No more gout, again, down 90 pounds, energy and mobility like he hasn't had in over 15 years. You can see he even looks younger on the system. We have Delana. She had a very massive improvement with her cholesterol, lowered her cholesterol 76 points, her triglycerides down 100 points. Even her blood pressure got improved. No longer has sleep apnea, helped with that as well. Off of all of her medications, guys, giving people their health back in a major way. We also have Tim here. Again, diabetes improved, A1C of 7.9 down to 5.4, lost 50 pounds in the process. Again, all due to this insulin resistance and this gut health being improved. He went from a 4XL shirt down to just an XL shirt, down from 11 meds a day down to just 2. Again, really getting people's health back. And then we have Catherine on the end here. She lost 63 pounds, no longer diabetic. Inflammation is gone, joint pain gone, vertigo gone, skin cleared up. Again, all these things either due to insulin resistance or the poor gut health. Energy all day, sleeping like a baby, confidence is back as well. And so, again, I just wanted to kind of show you what it's done for me, my wife, what it's done for others. And so, if it's something that you feel that could be something that's beneficial for you, you can reach out to whoever may have gotten you on this call. So if it was me or if you saw me on social media, definitely reach out to me, and I can tell you, I can definitely give you information about where it is that you can find out more. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the share real quick. And I'm gonna go ahead and also drop in the website where you can actually find out, again, a little bit more about the system. So it's gonna be resetwellness.info. And actually, let me be more specific and do resetwellness.info/system. Okay. And so that information, but again, a lot of people may have more questions about how this system actually works. I'm here for it. I'm here for people to get the amazing benefit from the system that has actually blessed me and my wife with. So with that, if anyone had any questions, we can definitely entertain those for the next few minutes. So I'll just wait and see if anyone is wanting to put anything in the chat. Uh, so I'll wait for a minute or two, or maybe a moment or two. Let's see if anything's coming through. Otherwise, we can definitely finish up and let you get the rest of your evening. But I pray that this information has been a blessing to you. I hope you to change some paradigms in terms of what can work with your health moving forward. Again, one of the biggest things that I like to try to debunk, and I think for a lot of people, it's it's kind of a shocker, but in their experience, they're probably like, I think there might be something to this calories in, calories out paradigm. There's actually a lot of data out there that shows that it just doesn't work. But a lot of times for people, they just know for their own bodies. I've been trying this thing for years, maybe for decades, and it's just not working. What's really going to help to change the tide when it comes to this battle between me and my health, me and my weight? It's going to be looking more so at the hormones, and again, the main one that we need to be focused on is going to be insulin. Well, with that short little rant at the end, I don't see that there's any questions, so we're going to go ahead and call it a night. But with that, I just want to pray blessings on anyone and everyone who may be watching this either right now or in the future. Is there a way we can get a copy of the presentation? Yes, definitely. Again, probably reach out to me however you found me. And I'm going to be recording right now, so I can definitely shoot this to you. And I think I'm in the process of using these. I'm going to be posting these on my YouTube channel. So for anyone who's looking for that handle on YouTube, it's going to be, I'll go ahead and put it in the chat real quick, but it's going to be UgoDoc1. So that's how you can find me pretty much on any social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I think even now on LinkedIn. I'm not as active there, but I'm planning on changing that. But yeah, UgoDoc1. I'll be posting most of these there. But again, if you aren't waiting, don't want to wait for that, definitely reach out to me. Once this thing finishes recording, I can send you the link so that again you can share it with somebody else. So uh, again, I'll try to get that, but yeah, if you can, as a Jude, I think that's you. If you can maybe send me that to me, I think we've got a text going on. That'll be great. So that way I can get that to you. It's a little harder to do just through Zoom. All right. Well, you guys again have a blessed rest of the weekend. Not too much left of it, but enjoy it for what it's worth. And again, I thank you for taking the time to learn a little bit more about how do you get your health back. Hope it's been a blessing.